The morning sun cast long shadows across the naval base as Lieutenant Sarah Chen walked toward the medical bay. Her crisp white uniform couldn't hide the slight limp in her step, or the way she favored her left side. 3 days had passed since the incident, and she had managed to keep it hidden from everyone, including her commanding officers. Sarah had always been tough. Growing up in a military family, she learned early that showing weakness wasn't an option. Her father, a retired Marine, had drilled into her the importance of pushing through pain and never giving up. When she joined the Navy 6 years ago, she carried that mindset with her. The incident happened during a routine training exercise on the USS Valor. Sarah was leading a team through a simulation when an equipment malfunction caused a heavy metal panel to break loose from the ceiling. Without thinking, she pushed her teammate out of the way, taking the full impact herself. The panel struck her torso with tremendous force, sending her crashing to the ground. Her first instinct was to get up quickly and pretend nothing happened. The other sailors gathered around, asking if she was okay. Sarah forced a smile and waved them off, claiming she was fine. She completed the exercise and went about her duties as if nothing had occurred. But something was very wrong. The pain in her side was getting worse, not better. What started as a dull ache had become sharp, stabbing sensations that took her breath away. She noticed dark bruising spreading across her ribs, and sometimes she felt dizzy when she stood up too quickly. Sarah knew she should report to the medical bay, but fear held her back. She was up for a promotion to lieutenant commander, and any medical issues could hurt her chances. The Navy was competitive, and she had worked too hard to let an injury derail her career now. Admiral Thomas Morrison was known throughout the fleet as a fair but demanding leader. At 55, he had served in the Navy for over 30 years and had earned respect from sailors at every level. He believed in leading by example and taking care of his people, but he also expected them to be honest and follow protocol. That Tuesday morning, Admiral Morrison was making his routine rounds of the base when he noticed something unusual. Lieutenant Chen, normally one of his most energetic and focused officers, seemed off. She moved more slowly than usual and appeared to be in some kind of discomfort. Morrison had an eye for detail that came from decades of military service. He noticed how Sarah kept one hand pressed against her side and how she winced slightly when she thought no one was looking. Her usual confident posture was replaced by a more guarded stance, as if she were protecting herself from further injury. During the morning briefing, Morrison watched Sarah carefully. She participated as always, but her voice lacked its usual strength. When she reached for a file on the table, he saw her pause and take a careful breath before moving. These were subtle signs that most people would miss, but Morrison's trained eye caught them all. After the briefing, Morrison made a decision. As the other officers filed out of the room, he asked Sarah to stay behind. She looked surprised but remained seated as the room emptied. "Lieutenant Chen," Morrison began, his voice carrying the authority of his rank, but also a note of concern. "I've noticed you seem to be having some difficulty today. Is there anything you need to report?" Sarah straightened in her chair, fighting back the wave of pain that shot through her side. "No, sir. Everything is fine. I'm ready for duty as always." Morrison studied her face. He had been in command long enough to recognize when someone was hiding something important. Sarah's eyes showed a determination to appear strong, but he could also see something else. Pain that she was trying desperately to conceal. "I appreciate your dedication, Lieutenant," Morrison said, walking around to the front of his desk. "But I've been doing this for a long time, and I can tell when one of my officers is not at full capacity. If there's an issue, medical or otherwise, it's better to address it now than to let it become a bigger problem later." Sarah felt her resolve wavering. The Admiral's words were spoken with genuine concern, not accusation. But she had come too far to give up now. Her promotion review was only weeks away, and she couldn't afford to show any signs of weakness. "Sir, I understand your concern, but I assure you that I'm fit for duty," Sarah replied. her voice steady despite the growing pain in her side. "If there were any medical issues, I would report them immediately according to protocol." Morrison nodded slowly, but he wasn't convinced. Something was definitely wrong, and his experience told him that Sarah was hiding an injury. In his years of command, he had seen too many good sailors try to tough out injuries that later became serious medical emergencies. "Very well, Lieutenant," Morrison said finally. "But I want you to know that my door is always open if you change your mind. Taking care of medical issues isn't a sign of weakness. It's smart leadership." As Sarah left the Admiral's office, she felt a mix of relief and guilt. She had managed to avoid revealing her injury, but she knew Morrison suspected something. The pain in her side was getting worse, and she was finding it harder to hide her discomfort. The next few hours were torture for Sarah. Every movement sent sharp pains through her torso, and she began to feel nauseous and lightheaded. During a routine inspection of the ship's equipment, she had to stop several times to catch her breath. Her fellow officers were starting to notice that something was wrong. By late afternoon, Sarah knew she was in serious trouble. The pain had become unbearable, and she could barely stand upright. As she tried to make her way back to her quarters, she stumbled and nearly fell. A passing sailor caught her arm and asked if she needed help. "I'm fine," Sarah managed to say, but her voice was weak and she was clearly struggling. The sailor looked concerned but didn't press the issue, though he made a mental note to keep an eye on the lieutenant. That evening, Admiral Morrison was in his office reviewing reports when he received a call from the duty officer. There had been several reports of Lieutenant Chen appearing unwell throughout the day, and her fellow officers were expressing concern. Morrison felt a surge of frustration and worry. He had given Sarah the opportunity to come clean about whatever was wrong, and she had chosen to continue hiding it. Now it appeared that her condition was worsening, and other people were starting to notice. As the base's commanding officer, Morrison had a responsibility to ensure the health and safety of all his personnel. He couldn't allow Sarah to continue putting herself and potentially others at risk by hiding a medical condition. It was time to take more direct action. The next morning, Morrison made his decision. He would call Sarah to his office for a formal medical inquiry. If she was injured and refusing treatment, he would order her to report to the medical bay immediately. The safety of his sailors always came first, no matter how it might affect their careers. The call came at 0800 hours sharp. Sarah was in her quarters, trying to get dressed for another day of hiding her worsening condition. The voice on the other end was Admiral Morrison's aide, informing her that she was to report to the Admiral's office immediately for a mandatory meeting. Sarah's heart sank. She knew this wasn't a routine call. Morrison had clearly decided that her behavior yesterday had raised too many red flags to ignore. As she made her way across the base, every step was agony. The bruising had spread further across her ribs, and she suspected she might have internal injuries that were getting worse by the hour. The walk to Morrison's office felt like the longest journey of her life. Other sailors she passed offered friendly greetings, but Sarah could barely manage to respond. Her breathing was shallow and labored, and she had to stop twice to steady herself against a wall. When she reached the Admiral's office, his aide gestured for her to go straight in. Morrison was standing behind his desk, his expression serious but not unkind. Also present was Dr. Patricia Williams, the base's chief medical officer. Sarah's stomach dropped when she saw the doctor. This was clearly not going to be a simple conversation. "Lieutenant Chen, please take a seat," Morrison said, his tone formal but concerned. "Dr. Williams is here because I have serious concerns about your health and fitness for duty." Sarah remained standing, her military training keeping her posture as straight as possible despite the pain. "Sir, I've already stated that I'm fit for duty. I don't understand why this meeting is necessary." Dr. Williams stepped forward, her medical bag in hand. She was a veteran Navy doctor who had seen countless sailors try to hide injuries over the years. Her trained eye immediately noticed several telltale signs that Sarah was in significant distress. "Lieutenant, I've received multiple reports from your colleagues expressing concern about your condition," Dr. Williams said gently. "They've observed you appearing to be in pain, moving differently than usual, and showing signs of physical distress. As the chief medical officer, I have a duty to investigate these reports." Morrison watched the exchange carefully. He could see that Sarah was struggling just to remain standing, and her face had a pale, drawn quality that hadn't been there a few days ago. Whatever she was hiding, it was clearly getting worse. "Sir, with respect, I believe these reports are exaggerated," Sarah said, trying to keep her voice strong. "I may have been tired from increased duties, but there's no medical issue that requires attention." "Lieutenant Chen," Morrison said, his voice taking on a more commanding tone, "I'm going to be very direct with you. I believe you're hiding an injury, and I believe that injury is getting worse. As your commanding officer, I'm ordering you to submit to a medical examination right now." Sarah felt panic rising in her chest. If they discovered the extent of her injuries, her promotion would be finished. Worse, if there were serious complications, she might face disciplinary action for failing to report a duty-related injury. But she could also see that she was running out of options. "Sir, I understand your concern, but I'm telling you that I'm fine," Sarah insisted, though her voice was starting to waver. "I would never put my fellow sailors at risk by remaining on duty if I were seriously injured." Dr. Williams had been quietly observing Sarah during this exchange, and what she saw alarmed her. The lieutenant was clearly favoring her left side. Her breathing was shallow and controlled, as if she were trying not to aggravate pain. And there were subtle signs of distress that were becoming more pronounced as the conversation continued. "Lieutenant, may I ask you to perform a simple physical assessment?" Dr. Williams asked. "Just some basic movements to evaluate your range of motion and overall physical condition." Sarah knew she couldn't refuse a direct order from the Admiral, but she also knew that any physical examination would reveal the extent of her injuries. She was trapped between her desire to protect her career and her body's inability to continue hiding the damage. "Dr. Williams, I appreciate your concern, but I don't think that's necessary," Sarah said. But even as she spoke, she could feel her strength ebbing. The room seemed to be getting slightly blurry around the edges, and she was having trouble focusing. Morrison could see that Sarah was barely holding herself together. Her refusal to cooperate was becoming more desperate, and he realized that whatever she was hiding must be serious. As a leader, he couldn't allow this to continue any longer. "Lieutenant Chen, this is a direct order," Morrison said firmly. "You will submit to immediate medical evaluation. If you refuse, I will have you placed under medical arrest and examined anyway. The choice is yours. But the examination is going to happen." Sarah felt the walls closing in around her. The pain in her side had become a constant burning agony, and she was starting to feel nauseous and dizzy. She knew that she couldn't keep this up much longer, but the fear of career consequences kept her fighting. "Sir, please," Sarah said, her voice finally showing the strain she was under. "I'm scheduled for promotion review in 2 weeks. If there's a medical issue on my record, it could affect my entire future in the Navy. Can't we wait until after the review?" Morrison's expression softened slightly. He understood the pressure Sarah was under and the competitive nature of military advancement, but he also knew that no promotion was worth risking a sailor's health or life. "Lieutenant, I understand your concerns about your career," Morrison said more gently. "But right now, my priority is making sure you're okay. If you're injured and we don't treat it properly, you might not have a career to worry about." Dr. Williams had been preparing her equipment during this exchange. She approached Sarah with a gentle but firm manner that made it clear the examination would proceed whether Sarah cooperated or not. "Lieutenant, I need you to know that whatever is going on, hiding it will only make things worse," Dr. Williams said. If you have an injury that's not being treated, it could lead to serious complications. The best thing you can do for yourself and your career is to let me help you now." Sarah looked between the Admiral and the doctor, feeling the last of her resistance crumbling. The pain was becoming unbearable, and she was starting to realize that she might be in serious medical danger. The room seemed to be spinning slightly, and she had to grip the back of a chair to keep herself steady. "All right," Sarah said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I want it on record that I'm cooperating under protest." Morrison nodded gravely. "Your objection is noted, Lieutenant. Dr. Williams, please proceed with your examination." Dr. Williams gestured toward a small examination area in the corner of Morrison's office. "Lieutenant, I need you to remove your uniform jacket so I can properly assess your condition. You can sit on the examination table." Sarah's hands trembled as she began to unbutton her jacket. This was the moment she had been dreading. Once they saw the extent of the bruising and damage to her torso, there would be no way to downplay the severity of her condition. As she slowly removed her jacket, Dr. Williams and Admiral Morrison could immediately see that something was very wrong. Sarah's undershirt was fitted enough to show the outline of extensive bruising along her left side, and the way she moved suggested significant pain and possible internal injuries. "Lieutenant, I need you to lift your shirt so I can see the extent of the bruising," Dr. Williams said, her voice becoming more urgent as she realized the seriousness of the situation. Sarah hesitated for a moment, knowing that this would be the point of no return. Once they saw her injuries, everything would change. Taking a deep breath that sent another spike of pain through her side, she slowly began to lift her shirt. Sarah slowly lifted her shirt, revealing the devastating extent of her injuries. The entire left side of her torso was covered in deep purple and black bruising that extended from just below her ribs to her hip. The bruising was so severe that it looked like she had been struck by a vehicle rather than a piece of equipment. Admiral Morrison's breath caught in his throat. In his 30 years of military service, he had seen combat injuries, training accidents, and various medical emergencies. But the sight of Sarah's torso shocked him into complete silence. The bruising was far more extensive than anything he could have imagined, and the pattern suggested possible internal organ damage. Dr. Williams immediately stepped forward, her medical training taking over. "Lieutenant, how long have you been hiding this?" she asked, her voice filled with both concern and professional urgency. "This level of bruising indicates serious trauma that should have been treated immediately." Sarah kept her shirt lifted, finally feeling a strange sense of relief that her secret was out. 3 days, she admitted quietly. "It happened during the training exercise on Monday. A metal panel came loose and hit me." Morrison found his voice again, though it was strained with disbelief and concern. 3 days? You've been walking around with injuries like this for 3 days. He turned to Dr. Williams. "Doctor, how serious is this?" Dr. Williams was already conducting a preliminary examination, gently pressing around the edges of the bruised area. Sarah winced and let out an involuntary gasp of pain when the doctor touched certain spots. "Admiral, this is extremely serious," Dr. Williams said, her professional composure barely concealing her alarm. "This level of trauma could indicate internal bleeding, damage to organs like the spleen or kidneys, and possibly fractured ribs. The fact that Lieutenant Chen has been functioning with these injuries for 3 days is both remarkable and extremely dangerous." Morrison felt a mix of emotions washing over him. He was impressed by Sarah's incredible toughness and dedication, but he was also angry that she had put herself at such risk. Most of all, he was worried about whether permanent damage had been done by the delay in treatment. "Lieutenant, you can lower your shirt now," Dr. Williams said gently, "but I need to get you to the medical bay immediately for a full examination and imaging." "This can't wait any longer." As Sarah carefully lowered her shirt, Morrison stepped closer. His usual commanding presence was replaced by genuine concern for one of his officers. "Sarah," he said, using her first name for the first time, "why didn't you come to me immediately? Why did you think you had to handle this alone?" Sarah looked up at the Admiral, tears forming in her eyes for the first time since the incident. The combination of pain, exhaustion, and finally being able to stop pretending was overwhelming. "Sir, I was afraid," she admitted. "I've worked so hard to get to this point in my career. My promotion review is in 2 weeks, and I thought if there was a medical issue on my record, it would ruin everything. I thought I could tough it out until after the review." Morrison shook his head slowly. "Lieutenant, do you realize that by hiding this injury you could have died? Internal bleeding, organ damage, infection. Any number of complications could have killed you while you were trying to protect your career." Dr. Williams was already on her radio, calling for a medical transport to take Sarah to the base hospital. "I need a stretcher team to Admiral Morrison's office immediately," she said into her radio. "I have a priority medical transport with possible internal injuries." "A stretcher?" Sarah protested weakly. "I can walk to the medical bay." "Absolutely not," Dr. Williams said firmly. "You're not taking another step until we know the full extent of your injuries. You've already risked enough by waiting this long." Morrison pulled up a chair next to where Sarah was sitting. His expression had shifted from official concern to something more personal. "Sarah, I want you to understand something. Your dedication and toughness are exactly the qualities that make you an outstanding officer. But your judgment in this situation was seriously flawed." Sarah nodded, feeling ashamed and exhausted. "I know, sir. I made a mistake." "The mistake wasn't getting injured," Morrison continued. "Accidents happen, and you actually showed heroism by pushing your teammate out of danger. The mistake was thinking that hiding the injury was the right thing to do." Dr. Williams had finished her radio call and was preparing some basic medical supplies. "Lieutenant, I need to ask you some questions about your symptoms over the past 3 days. Have you experienced any dizziness, nausea, changes in urination, or difficulty breathing?" Sarah thought about the question. "Yes to all of those, especially over the last day. This morning I felt really dizzy when I got up, and I've been nauseous on and off." Dr. Williams exchanged a worried look with Admiral Morrison. Those symptoms, combined with the extent of the bruising, suggested that Sarah's condition might be even more serious than it appeared. The medical team arrived quickly with a stretcher and emergency equipment. As they prepared to transport Sarah, Morrison stood up and placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Lieutenant, I want you to focus on one thing right now, getting better," Morrison said. "Don't worry about your promotion, don't worry about your career, don't worry about anything except following the doctor's orders and healing properly." "But Sir Breakwow, what about my review?" Sarah asked, fear creeping back into her voice. Morrison was quiet for a moment, considering his words carefully. "Sarah, let me tell you something I've learned in 30 years of military service. The Navy needs officers who are strong, dedicated, and brave. You've proven you have all of those qualities. But the Navy also needs officers who have good judgment and who can ask for help when they need it." The medical team was ready to transport Sarah, but Morrison continued speaking. "What happened here these past 3 days shows both your greatest strengths and an area where you need to grow. The fact that you continued functioning with these injuries shows incredible toughness. But the fact that you thought you had to handle this alone shows that you still have some things to learn about leadership." As they lifted Sarah onto the stretcher, she looked up at Admiral Morrison. "Sir, are you going to recommend against my promotion?" Morrison walked alongside the stretcher as they moved toward the door. "Lieutenant, I'm going to recommend that your promotion be delayed until you've fully recovered and we can have a comprehensive discussion about this incident. But I'm also going to recommend that you be considered for a commendation for your actions in saving your teammate." Sarah's eyes widened in surprise. A commendation. You threw yourself in front of a falling panel to save another sailor, Morrison explained. That's exactly the kind of selfless courage we want to recognize. The fact that you then made some poor decisions about the aftermath doesn't erase the heroism of that moment. Dr. Williams climbed into the ambulance with Sarah as they prepared to head to the hospital. Admiral, I'll call you as soon as we have a complete assessment of her condition. Morrison nodded and stepped back as the ambulance doors closed. As the vehicle pulled away, he stood thinking about the events of the past few days. Sarah's situation had reminded him why he took his role as a commanding officer so seriously. The sailors under his command were not just personnel, they were people with hopes, fears, and sometimes misguided ideas about what it meant to be strong. Later that day, Morrison received a call from Dr. Williams at the hospital. Sarah's injuries were serious but not life-threatening. She had 2 fractured ribs, severe bruising to her kidney, and significant soft tissue damage, but no internal bleeding had been detected. With proper treatment and rest, she would make a full recovery. Admiral, I have to say, Lieutenant Chen is incredibly fortunate, Dr. Williams reported. If she had waited even another day or 2 to seek treatment, this could have been a very different outcome. Morrison felt relief wash over him. How long will her recovery take? She'll need to be hospitalized for at least a week for monitoring and pain management, Dr. Williams explained. After that, probably 6 to 8 weeks of light duty before she can return to full active status. That evening, Morrison sat in his office writing 2 reports. The first was a formal incident report documenting Sarah's injury and the circumstances that led to the delayed treatment. The second was a recommendation for a Navy Achievement Medal recognizing her actions in saving her teammate. He also wrote a personal note that he planned to give to Sarah when she was feeling better. In it, he reflected on the lessons that both of them had learned from this experience about courage, judgment, and the difference between strength and stubbornness. The next morning, Morrison visited Sarah in the hospital. She was awake and looking much better, though still clearly in significant discomfort. "How are you feeling, Lieutenant?" he asked, taking a seat next to her bed. "Much better, sir. The doctors say I'm going to be fine," Sarah replied. "Sir, I want to apologize again for my poor judgment in this situation." Morrison held up a hand to stop her. "Sarah, you've already apologized and I've accepted it. Now I want to talk about the future. Your promotion review has been postponed until you're fully recovered and back on active duty, but I want you to know that this incident, while serious, is not going to end your career." Sarah felt tears of relief starting to form. "Thank you, sir. In fact," Morrison continued, "I think this experience has the potential to make you a better officer. You've learned some valuable lessons about when to ask for help and when personal pride can become dangerous. Those are lessons that will serve you well as you advance in rank." As Morrison prepared to leave, he turned back to Sarah with one final thought. "Lieutenant, true strength isn't about never needing help. True strength is about knowing when to ask for it. Remember that as you continue your career." 3 months later, Lieutenant Sarah Chen was promoted to Lieutenant Commander in a ceremony attended by Admiral Morrison and the entire crew of the USS Valor. In his remarks, Morrison spoke about the qualities that make exceptional naval officers: courage, dedication, judgment, and the wisdom to know that even the strongest people sometimes need help. Sarah kept the lessons from that difficult experience with her throughout her career. She went on to become a respected leader known not just for her toughness and dedication, but for creating an environment where her sailors felt comfortable reporting problems and asking for help when they needed it. And she never forgot the Admiral who taught her that true leadership sometimes means admitting when you're human.